Welcome to a journey through one of history's darkest chapters, right here on our channel. Today, we're delving deep into the chilling world of the Generalplan OST, a Nazi blueprint for conquest and devastation that still haunts our collective memory. We've meticulously pieced together these shocking plans and their impacts, not just to recount tales of sorrow, but to understand the depths of human cruelty and the importance of vigilance. If you're ready to uncover these hidden truths and explore how they continue to shape our world, hit the like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling content. Because history isn't just about the past, it's a lens through which we view and shape our future. Let's dive in. Welcome to Nuremberg, Germany, home to one of Europe's oldest railway museums, where history intertwines with the chilling details of the Second World War. Picture this: massive railway trains, unlike anything seen before, showcased through models and drawings. These weren't ordinary trains, they were double-decker giants, engineered to transport Germans to the Third Reich's eastern colonies at a groundbreaking speed of 250 kilometers per h. This train, so luxurious, it rivals the finest hotels. Reading rooms, smoking areas, cafes, bars, and even a dozen toilets. This marvel of engineering wasn't just about transport, it was about making a statement of power and luxury. But behind this facade lay a dark reality. Under the Nazi regime's Generalplan OST, millions of Germans were to be relocated eastward, with the indigenous populations of occupied Soviet territories facing brutal eviction or worse. This grand scheme, part of a broader policy of ethnogenocide, was a key charge at the Nuremberg trials, exposing the heinous crimes against humanity committed during the war. As the war neared its end, the Nazis desperately tried to erase their tracks, destroying most documents related to this ominous plan. It wasn't until 1945 that investigators unearthed mere fragments of evidence, transcripts and memos hinting at the full extent of these plans. The only complete OST plan, penned by Konrad Meyer-Helting, was discovered in 1947, hidden away until its eventual publication in 2009. This 100-page document, complete with financial details and diagrams, lays bare the chilling precision of the Nazi regime's plans. Alfred Rosenberg's journey to becoming one of the key ideologues of the Nazi Party is both intriguing and disturbing. Born on the fringes of the Russian Empire, Rosenberg's life took a pivotal turn when he moved to Munich in 1918 at the age of 25. It wasn't a politically motivated move, rather, it was personal. However, in Germany, his background as a man from Red Russia attracted attention. Despite his comprehensive knowledge of Russian culture and fluency in the language, Rosenberg adopted and began propagating deeply offensive and racist views about Russians, characterizing them as backward and primitive, akin to beavers or ants, incapable of achieving greatness. His distortion of cultural and racial history went as far as suggesting that even among the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, there were divisions of higher and lower races. Rosenberg's lack of genuine understanding of the complexities of race and history didn't impede the popularity of his ideas in Germany. His theories, steeped in bigotry and pseudoscience, resonated with the Nazi Party's narrative. Hitler, recognizing Rosenberg's potential to articulate and propagate Nazi ideology, brought him close within the party's ranks. His role in the party led to his involvement in the Action Against the Non-German Spirit in 1933. Where he contributed to the cultural genocide that saw the seizure and burning of thousands of books by authors deemed objectionable by the Nazi regime. This event marked the beginning of a dark era of cultural and racial oppression in Nazi Germany. Ultimately, Rosenberg's actions and ideologies had dire consequences. In 1946, after the downfall of the Nazi regime, he was convicted of war crimes at the Nuremberg trials and sentenced to death. In 1933, the Nazi Party's leadership in Germany began systematically removing non-German peoples from the nation's social and cultural life. This exclusion was notably severe for the Jewish community, who were forbidden from holding public office, owning land, marrying Germans, or sending their children to German schools. The regime's discrimination escalated in September 1935 with the enactment of the Nuremberg Laws. These laws established that only individuals with German or kindred blood could be citizens of the Third Reich. To enforce this, a department in Berlin was tasked with tracing every resident's lineage back to 1800. By 1940, the Nazis had introduced the T4 program, a sinister plan aimed at killing or sterilizing individuals deemed genetically or mentally unfit, including children and people with disabilities. This program resulted in the tragic loss of at least 275,000 lives. The Nazi regime adeptly used media, especially radio and cinema, to justify these mass killings. Germany, then the world's second-largest producer of films, used its cinematic output for propaganda. Films like The Eternal Jew and Judd Seuss were laced with anti-Semitic content and played a significant role in shaping public opinion. These films were so influential that incidents of violence against Jews were reported after screenings. Concentration camp guards were required to view these films to dehumanize their prisoners further. Hitler's vision for Germany included a grand plan to colonize Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, as well as the European part of the Soviet Union, fulfilling a historical Drang nach Osten, drive to the East policy that dated back to the 12th and 13th centuries. He aimed to establish a 1,000-year Reich without returning former colonies lost after World War I, instead focusing on expanding into Eastern territories. The realization of this plan began with the occupation of Western Poland in September 1939. Approximately 1 million ethnic Germans were resettled into these occupied territories, seizing the best lands and properties. The Polish population was stripped of civil rights, and Polish Jews faced ghettos and death camps. During the war, a fifth of the Polish population was exterminated, and nearly 3 million were forced into labor in Germany. This policy of forced Germanization and expansion was brutal in its implementation and impact. It was not just a military conquest, but also a deliberate effort to erase and replace entire cultures and populations. The Poles, like the Jews, were also considered Untermenschen, subhumans, by the Nazis, and they were subjected to systematic extermination and oppression. The Nuremberg trials, held after World War II, addressed these heinous acts. High-ranking Nazi officials, including Hermann Göring, were charged with the deliberate policy of exterminating ethnic groups, particularly the Polish people. Operation Barbarossa, initiated by Nazi Germany in 1941, was a massive and brutal military campaign aimed at the Soviet Union. Its goal was not only military defeat, but also territorial conquest and economic plunder. Hitler's plan envisioned a swift victory, expecting to crush the Red Army and occupy the European part of Russia, including Moscow and Leningrad, within 4 to 5 months. However, the scope of Operation Barbarossa went far beyond mere military conquest. The operation targeted key regions like Ukraine and the Caucasus, prized for their rich natural resources and fertile lands. Hitler's strategy involved reaching the Arkhangelsk-Astrakhan line and extending the reach of German bombers to the Urals. The agricultural areas of Ukraine and southern Russia were seen as vital food suppliers for Europe, and the manganese deposits in regions like Krivoy Rog and Zaporozhye were crucial for the German war effort. One of the most sinister aspects of this plan was the intended use of the conquered lands. Hitler placed high importance on exploiting these territories for their wealth. The initial phase of the campaign focused on capturing the Donbass region for its resources, followed by a campaign to seize the oil-rich Caucasus. By August 1941, the Wehrmacht had occupied most of Soviet Ukraine, Belarus, and the Baltic states. Hitler's first visit to the Eastern Front was to the ruins of the Brest fortress, symbolizing the Nazi command's intention to plunder and devastate the occupied territories. Prior to the attack on the Soviet Union, Hitler signed the secret Oldenburg Plan, also known as the Göring Green Folder. This plan outlined the systematic seizure of all raw materials and food from the Vistula to the Urals, the exportation of valuable industrial equipment to Germany, and the destruction of what remained. The USSR was to be transformed into an agrarian appendage of the Third Reich, with a chilling plan to condemn 30 million Russians to starvation. This trifecta of military annihilation, economic plunder, and genocidal intent, as encapsulated in the Barbarossa Plan, the Göring Green Folder, and the Generalplan OST Plan, clearly illustrates the Führer's and the Reich's destructive goals. Hermann Göring, a key figure in these plans, infamously addressed the military about the abundance of resources like white bread, apples, and sour cream in the Soviet Union, urging them to take everything. Yet, in this call for looting and resource extraction, there was a dark undercurrent: the intention to starve approximately 30 million Soviet citizens to death. The Generalplan OST, GPO, represented one of the most ambitious and horrific plans of the Nazi regime, far exceeding the devastation envisioned in the Oldenburg Plan. Under the supervision of Alfred Rosenberg and Heinrich Himmler in the Ministry for the Eastern Territories, the GPO was a blueprint for the radical transformation of Eastern Europe. It was a project of colonization and genocide, funded generously with about 500,000 Reichsmarks, and continually revised until its final version by Konrad Meyer in May 1942. The plan aimed at the systematic destruction and displacement of the local populations in the Soviet Union, particularly targeting areas like Little Russia, Ukraine, for German colonization. Fertile lands were to be cleared for German settlers who would cultivate them and integrate them into the Nazi vision of a future empire. One of the most chilling aspects of the GPO was the fate planned for major Soviet cities. Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, for instance, was to be completely obliterated, with its inhabitants exterminated, as Hitler sought to erase this window into Europe established by Peter the Great. Moscow was also earmarked for near-total destruction. The occupied territories were to be reorganized into 4 Reichskommissariats, vast regions directly under Nazi control and overseen by Heinrich Himmler. These included Reichskommissariat Ostland, encompassing Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and parts of northwestern Russia; Reichskommissariat Moscovian, planned for central Russia; Reichskommissariat Ukraine, an intended agrarian heartland for the Reich, stretching along the Dnieper and encompassing the Don and Volga regions; Reichskommissariat Caucasus, covering the republics of the North Caucasus and Transcaucasia, aimed at cutting off Russia from the Black Sea. Additionally, Crimea, referred to as Gotenland, land of the Goths, was designated to become part of Germany directly. These plans indicated that the annexed lands would never achieve independence, but would be permanently integrated as internal territories of the Third Reich. The Generalplan OST also emphasized the rapid transformation of these territories into full-fledged imperial districts. This transformation was not just territorial, but also demographic and cultural, aiming to erase the existing populations and their cultures to make way for German colonization and settlement. When local nationalist movements in Ukraine, Lithuania, and other regions attempted to establish their own governments following the German invasion, they were swiftly suppressed by the Nazi leadership. These actions underscored the Nazis' intent not to liberate these regions from Soviet control, but to subjugate and exploit them for the Third Reich's benefit. A key aspect of the plan was the division of Soviet territories, agreed upon with Japan, where everything west of the Omsk meridian was to be German-controlled. The process of Germanization involved more than just political and military control. It was about embedding the German nationality into the fabric of these new colonies. The plan outlined a strategy to root the German identity into these lands, primarily through agricultural settlement. German peasants were encouraged to move eastward, with land plots ranging from 40 to 100 hectares allocated to them. They were offered preferential government loans and resources such as livestock and grain, confiscated from the local populace. The design of the settlements was to reflect 19th century German villages, complete with facilities for Nazi party members, Hitler Youth dormitories, lecture halls, swimming pools, and playgrounds, alongside infrastructure like roads and communication networks. The vision was clear: These regions, particularly the fertile lands of Ukraine and the North Caucasus, were to be transformed into German-dominated agricultural hubs. The local population would be displaced, and the lands would be cultivated by German farmers, solidifying the Reich's presence and erasing the cultural and historical ties of the original inhabitants. In 1942, under Heinrich Himmler's direction, the Nazi regime began implementing their colonization plans in the occupied territories of the Soviet Union, starting with Ukraine. The Hagewald settlement near Himmler's headquarters marked the onset of this process, where 10,000 ethnic Germans were relocated from Germany. This move was preceded by the deportation of the local population, numbering around 15,000 people. Himmler envisioned this German East as a breeding ground for the future expansion of the German population. He projected that in 500 years, the area would transform from being inhabited by 120 million Slavs to 600 million Germans. The overarching plan was to remove the local population and replace them with German colonists, effectively making these territories part of the fatherland. Konrad Meyer's plan detailed that successful Germanization would be achieved when the land and all significant business, official, and skilled worker positions were in German hands. To facilitate the colonization, 5,650,000 Germans were to be resettled in these areas over 25 years, drawing from all over Europe and even overseas. The transportation infrastructure for this massive movement included a project for broad-gauge railways connecting Berlin to key cities like Minsk, Leningrad, Moscow, Kazan, Stalingrad, and Baku. This project encompassed the construction of large locomotives and trains with increased capacity, including special wagons for transporting forced Russian laborers to Germany. The early versions of the OST plan also included the eviction of 31 million indigenous people from the lands designated for German settlement. Meyer suggested relocating these people to reservations with infertile land, effectively condemning them to starvation. He proposed a pacification strategy by granting them temporary land use rights in collective and state farmlands, based on a reasonable selection principle and social promotion of positive forces from among the local population. Specific plans for eviction included removing 3 million of the 3.2 million residents from the cities of Leningrad, Novgorod, Pskov, and Kalinin regions. In the south of Ukraine and Crimea, 650,000 people were to be evicted from areas with a total population of 790,000. The remaining inhabitants in these regions were intended to be completely Germanized. The plan also outlined varying degrees of Germanization for the inhabitants of the Baltic states. More than 50% of Estonians, up to 50% of Latvians, and about 15% of Lithuanians were targeted for intense Germanization efforts. This process would involve a combination of cultural assimilation, displacement, and demographic engineering to align these populations with the Nazis' racial and cultural ideals. Konrad Meyer's Generalplan OST, a harrowing blueprint for territorial expansion and population decimation, was estimated to cost a staggering 45 billion Reichsmarks. The plan proposed a mix of private investment and funds from the imperial budget with a special Eastern tax levied within the Reich to involve every German citizen in the colonization of Russian territories. The plan's future financial needs were expected to be met through plunder and the exploitation of slave labor from prisoners of war and civilian captives. Meyer's plan hinged on the availability of cheap foreign labor for an extended period. This labor would primarily involve prisoners of war and civilians captured by the police. He projected that all construction work in the eastern colonies would be completed over 5 five-year plans, a span of 25 years. By the end of this period, the plan anticipated a significant reduction in the need for slave labor, implying that the local population would largely become redundant and unnecessary. A central, yet often overshadowed aspect of this plan was the use of famine as a tool for population control and destruction. Similar to the Holocaust, this strategy involved depriving local populations, especially in the Soviet Union, of food resources, thereby dooming them to starvation. This approach was not unique to the Soviet territories. The Dutch experienced a severe famine in the winter of 1944 to 45 due to the Germans withholding food supplies. To facilitate their objectives in the east, the Nazis established a vast network of concentration camps. During World War II, 1,634 camps were built across Germany and the occupied territories, serving not only as detention centers, but also as sites for systematic extermination. Methods of killing included gas chambers using Cyclone B pesticide and diesel exhaust fumes. In the Soviet Union alone, over 60 concentration camps were established, including the Trostenitz camp near Minsk, where approximately 206,500 civilians were tortured and killed. The scale of this atrocity is staggering, with about 18 million people detained in German concentration camps during the war, and 11 million of them perishing. The liberation of Auschwitz by the Red Army in January 1945 revealed the extent of these horrors, including mountains of clothes, shoes, and even human hair used for stuffing mattresses. The Nuremberg trials in November 1945 marked the beginning of justice for these crimes against humanity. Konrad Meyer, who was tried in 1947, escaped capital punishment due to the incomplete implementation of his plan, receiving a prison sentence instead. In 2002, Humboldt University of Berlin, where some staff members had participated in developing the OST plan, issued a statement acknowledging these historical atrocities and expressing remorse for the immeasurable suffering caused. This acknowledgement was a critical step in confronting the dark legacy of the university's involvement in the war and the catastrophic impact of the policies it helped devise. The statement emphasized the importance of recognizing historical truths and assessing them critically, offering an apology to all who suffered due to the Generalplan OST and its ramifications. We hope this deep dive into history has not only informed, but also inspired you. If it has, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, hit the like button to support our channel, subscribe for more thought-provoking content, and share this video to keep the conversation going. Together, we can ensure that these stories are not forgotten, serving as beacons to guide our steps towards a future where such atrocities never happen again. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the past, and stay tuned for more explorations into the depths of history and the human experience.